There are used SUVs sitting on dealer lots right now that buyers walk past for one simple reason. They are not the fashionable choice. They do not have the newest giant touchscreen. They do not have the badge everybody on the internet tells you to chase. And because of that, some of them are selling for thousands less than the more obvious Toyota and Honda alternatives, even though a carefully chosen example can still have a very long life ahead of it. That is where smart used car buyers make their money. They do not buy the vehicle everybody wants. They buy the vehicle everybody forgot to look at. And today, I want to show you 3 SUVs that fit that description better than almost anything else on the used market. None of these is perfect. Every one of them has something you need to inspect before handing over your money. But find the right engine, the right model year, a clean title, good maintenance records, and a pre-purchase inspection that comes back clean, and you could end up with an SUV that costs far less than a newer crossover, while still having a realistic shot at 200,000, 250,000, or even 300,000 miles with proper maintenance. The last SUV is the expensive one of the group, but it is also the one I would trust most if I had to buy one vehicle and keep it for the next 10 years. Before we get there though, number 3 is the one bargain hunters should be paying attention to because depreciation has absolutely crushed its price. The Kia Sorento, especially the V6 versions from the later years of the 3rd generation, is one of those SUVs that still suffers from an old reputation. A lot of buyers see Kia and immediately think about cheap cars from 20 years ago. That memory is one reason a used Sorento can cost thousands less than a comparable Toyota Highlander or Honda Pilot. But you cannot just buy any Sorento and assume you found a hidden gem. This is where the engine choice and the model year matter. For the kind of buyer who wants a traditional, naturally aspirated family SUV, the 3.3-liter V6 is the version worth studying. In a 2018 Sorento, that engine makes 290 horsepower and is paired with a traditional 6-speed automatic. For 2019, Kia moved the V6 to an 8-speed automatic. That matters because you will sometimes hear people describe every one of these V6 Sorentos as having the same transmission, and that is simply not true. The reason the V6 is attractive is not because it is magically indestructible. It is attractive because you are getting a smooth, naturally aspirated engine, useful power available, all-wheel drive available, 3-row seating, and a surprisingly nice cabin for used car money that can now fall deep into the low to mid-teens depending on mileage, trim condition, and location. In some markets, higher mileage examples are even cheaper. That is a lot of vehicle for the money. But here's the honest part. Do not buy one just because the price looks dirt cheap. Earlier 3.3-liter Sorentos, particularly some 2016 and 2017 vehicles, deserve extra attention for coolant loss and head gasket-related concerns. And certain vehicles received extended warranty coverage for specific problems. There was also a limited 2017 recall involving improperly heat-treated crankshafts on a small production group. That does not mean every V6 Sorento is bad. It means this is exactly the kind of used SUV where the VIN check, maintenance history, cold start cooling system inspection, and pre-purchase inspection are not optional. On a test drive, start with the engine completely cold. Watch for unusual smoke, knocking, coolant smell, overheating, history, or unexplained coolant loss. Look under the oil cap. Check the coolant reservoir. Make sure the temperature stays rock solid during a long drive, not just a 5-minute loop around the dealership. Then, test the transmission from cold and again after the vehicle is fully warmed up. It should shift cleanly without slipping violent engagement or a transmission warning light. On an all-wheel drive model, find an empty parking lot and make slow, tight circles in both directions. You are listening and feeling for binding, clunking, or anything that suggests the driveline has been neglected. Then get underneath it. In the Rust Belt, a cheap SUV can become an expensive SUV very quickly if corrosion has taken over the subframe brake lines or suspension hardware. The reason I still like the right Sorento is simple. The market prices it like an unwanted Kia, but the vehicle itself can give you a lot more than that price suggests. A clean 2018 or newer V6 example with documented maintenance can make sense for a family that needs space but refuses to spend $25,000 or $30,000 just to get a familiar badge. Parts availability is generally good. Independent shops know how to work on them, and you are not dealing with some exotic European drivetrain that requires a specialist every time a warning light appears. The weakness is that resale value is not Toyota level. Fuel economy is only average. The third row is better for occasional use than full-time adult duty, and you must be much more careful about the exact history of the vehicle. This is not a blind purchase. It is a value purchase. If you find a clean one, inspect it properly, and buy it at the right price. You can get an enormous amount of family SUV for the money. But the next SUV is the one I would point toward if you want something smaller, simpler, better to drive, and easier to own for the long haul. Number 2 is the Mazda CX-5, and this is where a lot of Toyota shoppers accidentally spend more money than they need to. The CX-5 has always had a strange position in the market. People who drive one usually understand it immediately. It feels tighter and more controlled than most compact crossovers. The interior feels more expensive than the price suggests. The steering does not feel like a video game. But when ordinary used car buyers start shopping, many of them go straight to the RAV4 or CRV and never even test drive the Mazda. That leaves an opening. For a buyer focused on long-term simplicity, the naturally aspirated 2.5-liter version is the one I would study first. It gives you a traditional 6-speed automatic instead of a continuously variable transmission, and there is no turbocharger on the naturally aspirated version. That does not guarantee zero problems, but it keeps the basic powertrain familiar and relatively straightforward. A 2018 CX-5 today can land around the mid-teens in national pricing guides, with real listings moving higher or lower depending heavily on mileage and trim. That means a clean one can still cost real money, but it is often cheaper than a similarly aged Toyota with the same kind of mileage. And the value is not just in the purchase price. The CX-5 is one of those vehicles where the smart money is in buying the boring mechanical combination. Skip the idea that you need the most powerful engine or the most complicated trim. Find the naturally aspirated 2.5-liter engine. Look for regular oil changes. Make sure the transmission has not been abused. And spend your money on condition instead of badges and options. The first thing to check is the maintenance history. A reliable engine still needs clean oil. A timing chain is not an excuse to ignore maintenance. Traditional automatic is not an excuse to pretend transmission fluid lasts forever. The second thing to check is the infotainment system. Some Mazda Connect systems from this era developed annoying screen or control problems, and infotainment issues have been the subject of extended coverage and litigation on certain vehicles. That is not an engine failure, but it can still become a frustrating repair on a car you otherwise love. Spend 10 minutes with the system. Test the screen controller Bluetooth, backup camera navigation if equipped, and every button you can touch. The third thing to check is the body. Mazda paint can look beautiful when it is clean, but inspect the nose, hood, roof edge, and wheel arches carefully for chips, previous repair work, rust, or cheap repainting. Then take it on a real highway drive. Do not buy a used SUV after a 10-minute test around city streets. Get it fully warm. Accelerate through every gear. Listen for wheel bearing noise. Feel for vibration. Make sure the steering wheel stays straight. Hit a rough road and listen to the suspension. A CX-5 that has been properly maintained should feel tight. If it feels loose, noisy, or neglected, do not let the Mazda badge convince you the problems will disappear after you buy it. The biggest reason to choose the CX-5 over something like a RAV4 is not that the Mazda is automatically more reliable. It is that the Mazda can deliver a very strong combination of durability, lower market hype, good fuel economy, a normal automatic transmission, and driving manners that do not punish you for buying the sensible car. The downside is interior space. The rear seat and cargo area are not as generous as some competitors, and if your definition of an SUV includes serious towing or hard off-road use, this is not your vehicle. This is a pavement-first crossover. It is good in bad weather when properly equipped and running the right tires, but it is not a replacement for a body-on-frame truck. There is another warning here too. Do not lump every CX-5 powertrain together. Turbocharged versions have different concerns from the naturally aspirated 2.5-liter engine. So the cheap one, with the biggest horsepower number, is not automatically the smartest long-term buy. For the budget buyer trying to keep a vehicle to 200,000 miles and beyond, simpler is often better. And this is where people get the whole used car game backward. They become obsessed with buying the lowest mileage car instead of the best maintained car. I would rather have a CX-5 with 100,000 highway miles, clean oil change records, good tires, dry fluids, and one careful owner than a 70,000-mile example that spent its life missing services and bouncing from auction to auction. Mileage is only one part of the story. Condition is the story. Now, before we get to number one, there is one SUV that most buyers do not actually overlook because they have never heard of it. They overlook it because they think they already understand what it is. They see it as a boring family hauler, a soccer mom SUV, the vehicle you buy when you have given up on having anything interesting in the driveway. And that boring reputation is exactly what makes it one of the smartest long-term used purchases on this list. Number one is the Toyota Highlander V6, especially the third-generation models from 2014 through 2019. Now, I need to be honest immediately. The Highlander is not as dirt cheap as the Sorento. Toyota resale value makes sure of that. A 2017 Highlander can still sit around the high teens or low 20s, depending on trim, mileage, condition, and region. But this is the SUV where paying a little more upfront can still make financial sense if your plan is to keep it for a very long time. The 2014 through 2016 V6 models use the older 6-speed automatic, while the 2017 through 2019 V6 models received a more powerful 3.5-liter D4S engine and an 8-speed automatic. And here is another detail that gets repeated incorrectly all the time. The later V6 does use direct injection, but Toyota's D4S system combines direct injection with port injection. That is an important difference from a direct injection-only design. The engine makes 295 horsepower in the 2017 Highlander, and the entire vehicle is built around a very different philosophy from many newer mid-size SUVs. There is no tiny turbocharged four-cylinder trying to move a three-row family vehicle. There is no continuously variable transmission. You get a naturally aspirated V6 and a conventional automatic. That is why these vehicles remain so attractive to buyers who care more about what happens at 180,000 miles than what happens during the first 3 years of a lease. Can every Highlander reach 300,000 miles? Of course not. Rust can kill one. Neglect can kill one. An overheated engine can kill one. A previous owner who never changed fluids can destroy one just as effectively as any other vehicle. But a well-maintained Highlander has the kind of powertrain history that makes high mileage a realistic goal instead of a fantasy. The smartest buying strategy is not to chase the cheapest Highlander in the country. Cheap Highlanders are often cheap for a reason. Search for the boring one, the one with an older owner, the one with a thick folder of service records, the one that has 4 matching quality tires instead of 4 different bargain brands, the one with clean fluids, no warning lights, no fresh undercoating sprayed over suspicious rust, and no story about why the title is branded. On a 2017 through 2019 model test, the transmission carefully at low speed and on the highway. Make sure shifts are smooth when cold and hot. Check for fluid leaks. Test the stop-start system if equipped. Make sure every electronic feature works, because an old Toyota can still have an expensive power liftgate touchscreen radar sensor or climate control problem. Check the tires for uneven wear, because a big family SUV can hide alignment and suspension neglect. Look under the vehicle for rust, especially if it has lived through 10 winters in road salt. Check the water pump area and cooling system for signs of leakage. And before you buy, run the VIN through the recall database. That step costs nothing, and skipping it makes no sense on any used vehicle. The Highlander's biggest weakness is also the reason some people avoid it. It is boring. It does not drive like the Mazda. It does not look as rugged as a 4Runner. It will not impress somebody who measures a vehicle by screen size or 0 to 60 numbers. The third row is useful but not enormous, and fuel economy from a V6 3-row SUV is never going to feel like a hybrid. Prices are also strong because everybody already knows Toyota reliability has value. But that is the point. You are not buying excitement. You are buying a vehicle designed to disappear into your life. Start it every morning. Take the kids somewhere. Drive 800 miles to visit family. Carry groceries. Sit in traffic. Run it for another year. Change the oil. Change the fluids. Replace the brakes and tires. Keep going. That kind of boring can save you a fortune. And when you compare it with a used luxury SUV at the same price, the Highlander starts making even more sense. A 10-year-old German luxury SUV may have a beautiful interior and a badge that looks expensive in the driveway. But one suspension failure, cooling system repair, oil leak, or electronic module can erase the money you thought you saved buying used. The Highlander gives you the opposite experience. It may not make your neighbors jealous, but your repair shop might get lonely. So here is the final ranking. The Sorento V6 is the bargain hunter's choice. It can give you a huge amount of SUV for the money, but you need to be careful about model year vehicle history, cooling system condition, recalls, and previous maintenance. The naturally aspirated Mazda CX-5 is the smart compact choice. It is simple enough, mechanically, efficient enough for daily driving, better to drive than most of its competitors, and still overlooked by buyers who automatically search for Toyota or Honda. And the Highlander V6 is the long-term ownership choice. It costs more to buy, but for the person who wants to purchase one SUV, maintain it properly, and keep driving long after the loan is gone, it is very hard to ignore. The real secret is not that any one of these vehicles is bulletproof. Nothing is bulletproof. The secret is that the used car market does not price vehicles purely by mechanical quality. It prices them by reputation demand, fashion, badge, financing, color, mileage, and what the next buyer thinks is cool. That creates mistakes, and those mistakes are where a careful buyer finds value. So the next time a salesman tells you the only reliable used SUV is the overpriced one everybody else wants, slow down. Check the service records. Check the VIN. Get underneath it. Pay an independent mechanic for a pre-purchase inspection. Buy condition, not hype. Because the smartest person on the used car lot is usually not the one driving home in the newest SUV. It is the one who found the old, boring, overlooked vehicle that still has another 100,000 miles left in it, while everybody else walked right past.